Welcome to Daredevil in the Details, a show that explores and dotes on the philosophy and themes of Netflix's Daredevil, a digression collection brought to you by A Method to the Madness and ZeroIndent. I'm author DC McNeil, and I'm joined, as always, by Patrick from A Method to the Madness. For our Season 1 finale, Pat, we made it.
Woo!
Yeah. We did it. And claps all around. Man,
Party popper emojis.
Exactly. We should get. I'll artificially put in some cheering to make it sound like there's a live audience. Yeah.
Thank you.
It'll work it out in the edit. It'll sound a lot more impressive, I promise. Pat, man, this episode's so good. We're talking about episode 13, which is the season finale, written by Bill Everett and Drew Goddard, directed by Stephen S. D. Knight. Man, this was a really good episode of TV. Like. The first note I have in my document is, now this is television.
Yeah. This episode has an amazing rhythm, which is something that these Daredevil writers somehow do so well compared to like most other TV. Have like this really great understanding of structure and stakes and stuff like that.
Yeah, it has a cadence that I think is really hard to put your finger on. I've been thinking a lot about Andor because I've been rewatching Andor in the background, and like that has a similar like rhythm to it. Like you have these little beats that build up to like kind of ordinary climaxes of tension, and then you have moments of like where like pure danger where like it feels like everything could go wrong. I feel like that can be really hard to get right, and this season just like there was a moment about halfway through this episode where I forgot how long there was left, and I was like, "Oh, they've done it. That's not how I remember this going."
Psych.
I was like, "Oh no." Yeah, it's really good. I also love I love the way that this episode is framed because, and we'll get into the details of it, but the way that it like even as it's ramping up to end, it feels like it could go differently. It doesn't feel like a sure thing, and that's again like a really hard thing to. That's I guess stakes to as what you were saying. Like, it feels like Fisk could get away. Yeah,
he almost does.
Yeah, and then as we learn, maybe
if not for that meddling Daredevil.
If it weren't for their meddling men in their red suits.
God damn it! Yeah.
Okay, Pat, could you read us the summary, please, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts.
Episode 13, Daredevil. Matt and Karen attend Ben's funeral in a bittersweet opening sequence. Later, Fisk confronts Owsley, learning of Leland's scheme to poison Vanessa. Leland reveals he's secretly kept Detective Hoffman for a rainy day and blackmails Fisk. Wilson sees red and throws Leland down an elevator shaft, killing him instantly. Meanwhile, Matt and Foggy reconcile some of their differences, working with Karen to build a case against Fisk. Realizing they will need the man in the mask, Matt heads out and convinces Hoffman to testify against Fisk. The FBI begin tearing down Fisk's operation, arresting corrupt policemen in the daylight and quickly zeroing in on Fisk himself. While in custody, Fisk is freed by his own private militia. Matt heads to Potter's workshop to collect his symbol. In the iconic red and black suit, Matt tracks down Fisk. The two brutalize each other in a bloody brawl. Ultimately, Matt beats Fisk and Mahoney arrests Fisk. Vanessa flees the city. Matt, Foggy, and Karen celebrate Fisk's incarceration, and we learn that the newspaper has labeled the man in the mask Daredevil. Credits.
Man, it's so good. I was saying I texted you last night when I finished it because my biggest thought is like kind of what you were saying, which is like the pacing of this. And I guess we'll try and talk about why it works so well, but it doesn't feel... I think sometimes TV show finales, you can feel like there can be like an artificial importance that they create for themselves. I think a lot about the Doctor Who finales under Chris Chibnall, and they feel like they go like, we have to be the biggest, most important episode possible, and the way to do that is to have the highest stakes you could possibly imagine every single time. And like once you've done that twice, they're not the highest stakes you could possibly imagine anymore.
Yeah.
You know, like what are the stakes here? Well, if they don't get Fisk, he's going to keep doing what he's doing. Like it's not a world, like they're not world ending it does feel desperate because they've tried everything else, but like it's not a universe breaking crescendo, and I think that's why I like it so much. Is it's got that mundanity that I think is what this show is really playing in, with its ideas.
The show communicates the consequences of Fisk being around quite blatantly from the opening of the episode. He murders Ben. Like, he just straight up kills this, like, really... It's like such a tragic, death. And, like, that is what happens when Fisk is around, man. Like, you gotta fucking put this fucker away,
And, like, yeah. It's not just that it's not just that, like, Ben is a good person. It's like, Ben is a famous reporter. Like, him getting murdered is like, it's crazy that this just happens. And then we learn later in this episode that, like, Fisk even has, like, a senator on his payroll. And that just made me go, like, oh, they need to stop this guy. Like, that was a really good... It's the little textured details like that I think help reinforce what's already been communicated, like you said. Yeah, I mean, the opening itself is... I thought it's a really interesting way of shooting this. You get the funeral itself in this kind of montage in slow-mo with music, and then you get some really clever framed shots where you then have Hell's Kitchen in the background of a few other shots, but it's like the serenity of the space they're in, like the graveyard itself, and then the reality of the city behind them, which is the thing that ultimately got Ben killed. And then you've got Karen, who thinks she's the one that got Ben killed on that side of serenity. And then when she goes over to talk to Ben's wife, she's framed with the city behind her. I thought it was really clever. Simple blocking in the scene where it's like, and Matt gets to be isolated in this sequence from both the city and from everyone else. I think it's really, it's like, it's one of those things of, like, it could just be because of the location they had and they shot it that way, but it feels very deliberate. And there's something about this funeral that I just think is really restrained and excellent.
And the connection I made was that, like, it's a really... Ben's death is a really, like, ugly death, like, in terms of just because he was such a moral person trying to do his best. His whole arc is about making this decision to spend time with his wife and stuff like that, knowing that his work is dangerous and potentially going to get him killed. And then it does. And and all the circumstances around it, like Fisk killing him, thinking he's righteous because Ben visited his mother. And then, Karen thinking that it's her fault and stuff like that.
And the fact that he gets killed because she tricked him, right?
Yeah. And typically for funerals or when you're, burying someone, typically it's this bucolic sort of setting that it's done in. Whereas here, it's like, it's kind of like Gotham. It's, industrial, this brutal, non-life sustaining kind of place. And those shots of the city in the background combined with Ben's funeral, I thought gave it this kind of ugliness, which I thought like paralleled each other. That's how I felt.
There's a way in which, like, I think the show is interested in how these characters take ownership of that ugliness. You get that. I mean, we'll talk about it when we get to Fisk's monologue toward the end, but I think there's the way this scene plays out basically is, so you have the funeral that Lantham is conducting, and then Karen goes over to have a word with Ben's wife, and Karen's like basically says, like, I feel like this was my fault, and Ben's wife is like, let me be honest, this had nothing to do with you. He viewed you, he's like, he talked about you all the time. He kind of thought of you as a daughter of a sort, or, if he ever had kids, he would want them to turn out like you, kind of thing. And she kind of goes, actually, this is who Ben was. Like, you don't have to take ownership or guilt of this. Ben Ben was this person, and then she reveals to the extent that he was this person, which is he had just a crazy death insurance put together, you know, in the likely event that he was killed doing his job. It's not just that he was this person, it's that he knew who he was and made the decisions he made anyway. And it kind of it frames Karen's guilt differently than I wonder if a different story would think that this moment had different utility for Karen's character. I wonder if in a different story, rather than, because it doesn't remove her guilt, it changes the geography of the guilt. It goes, yeah, you did, like she did have a role to play in it, but this is part of a much larger story that she's not a part of, which is Ben's life and the decisions he's made.
That is such a great like observation. Yeah, I think you're totally right. In a lesser show, the funeral scene would just have a lot of close-up shots of Karen looking really sad, and then maybe it'd have like a double beat of her going back to her apartment and downing some more bottles of gin or something like that, you know? Yeah, I agree.
No, totally. Yeah, the self-pity angle rather than going it's rather than what it really does, which is go, who was Ben? And I think that detail of like, Karen's like, is there anything I can do? And she's like, no. Like, even now he's taking care of me. And that was when that was like so heartbreaking to me. I was like, that's so beautiful and like heartbreaking. And just like it is such an ugly death. And yet because of the person that Ben was and the decisions he made and who he was, there is still beauty that comes from it. And I think that is like such a testament to the show's understanding of like what this character means in the larger kind of like ethical conversation it's having about morality and damnation and judgment and things like that. You know,
the show also, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say like it plays into that larger religious piece that we've been talking about. You know, like the greatest of us has to fall. You know, it's not. Right. It's not Jesus's fourth apostle that betrays him. It's his most trusted, right? Like that's someone right. The most righteous among us must fall in order for it to be the blackest day when before things get better kind of thing.
Yeah, true. I like that.
That's why they'll kill Pat first.
That's right. Like no one could fathom killing me. Like why would anyone want to do that?
Exactly right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This show does that a lot, of retroactively giving you like a lot of new information about character, like after they're on screen. I don't want to spoil anything, but like, yeah, it's that detail about how Ben took out the life insurance and stuff like that. Like that's a good example of that, which we will see more of.
I wonder. To me, this is like a real hallmark of really authored works. I've been thinking about this a lot recently because there's been a lot of hoo-ha made about how will we be able to tell if works are authored or not, or if they're generated and things like that. And it's decisions like that where logically, if a character's off the board, their influence ends. That's like the logical thing to happen. But that's not really how life works. Like even after someone passes away, you continue to learn new things about them and they still have influence on the world in little discrete ways. And we're obviously going to see that next season with some of the maneuvers they do with some of the main characters. And then further again into season 3. And it's like the fact, like Ben's death he doesn't die a martyr for just to inspire these characters. His death is like a meaningful part of their lives and continues to be in the same way that his life was. And that's like it's so careful in its approach as well. I don't know. I was thinking about the Ben Affleck Daredevil, which is going to go up on the feed sometime after this episode, and how like everything in that is like it's just like no restraint. It's very heavy and like direct. And there's a funeral in that, which is the exact like it's the worst version of a funeral in a story. And it was just an interesting contrast of the two funeral sequences in my head of like, this is how you do it right, and then this is how like Sam Raimi did it in 2001, basically.
God, I don't even remember a funeral scene in that movie.
It's at like the very end for Elektra's death, I think.
Oh, okay.
Spoilers for that, I guess.
Man, yeah, I don't want to think about that movie anymore.
No, we let's move on. There is one conversation here I want to talk about. So Father Lantom comes up to Matt actually, because Matt's standing alone while Karen goes to have a word. And Father Lantom says, "How are you holding up?" And Matt says, "Like a good Catholic boy." To which Lantom responds, "That bad, huh?" And Matt says, "He was a good man and he's gone." Then there's a beat, and he says, "Because I haven't stopped what's happening to this city." It's not because I haven't stopped Fisk. It's not because I haven't, worked hard enough. It's I haven't stopped what's happening to this city. And it's again that like ownership of the ugliness. It's that like ownership of like the space and the geography and the people within it. It's like the soul of the city is really what he's talking about here. And I also like that detail of Matt saying, like a good Catholic boy, repressing everything, keep it in, pretend that it's not affecting you,
Yeah.
It's a nice detail. Look, I mean, I think that's all I have on the funeral, so I guess we can get into like the weeds and potatoes of the plot maybe, because that's really, it's a relatively plot-heavy episode. I think the next piece I have here is Karen and Matt having their conversation after the funeral. And Karen almost saying out loud that she's afraid Fisk will find out she killed Wesley. She's like this close to admitting it to Matt.
Oh, I didn't pick up on that. Okay.
She says something like, Matt's like, he basically is like, there's something wrong still. Like, I can tell there's something in your voice. I thought it would go away. But it's still
that's
there.
at the end.
Is that at the end?
Yeah, that's like at the very end after Fisk gets like put away.
Yeah.
I thought in that scene that you're talking about though, I thought she was just gonna. I mean, that makes sense, but I thought she was just saying, "What if he finds out that I went with Ben to the thing?"
Well, that's what
Not
she
that,
says.
What if he finds out?
But the way that I read that scene was that she says that in place of that I killed Wesley.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Honestly, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's my fault. What happened to Ben? I pushed him into a story that he didn't want.
Ben Urich never got pushed into doing anything he didn't want to do. He was a reporter. That's what he lived for. And he passed to doing what he loved. What he had to do.
We should be getting back.
It was nice to meet you, Karen.
Is there anything that you need and anything at all that I can...
Oh, Ben's taking care of all that. He took out a policy years back when that river water story turned ugly. He always took care of me. Still is.
I could be like misreading that, but again, I just think it's one of those conversations where they're both not saying the whole truth, and it just continues to be like this really fascinating kind of like dramatic interplay between them, where they're just both constantly like vulnerable but not quite honest. It's fascinating to just sort of be a fly on the wall for.
She has a great line when they're talking. She goes, "How do you stop someone like that? Someone who has so much." And it's like yeah, that is the gist of Fisk as a villain. Like just so much political power, like that. When the law doesn't apply to you, when morality doesn't apply to you, when you're outside of all boundaries, like yeah, that's a terrifying villain.
And he even, the last boundary he had, which is like placing his behavior against this kind of internal scale of like righteous or not, that last barrier dissolves in this episode.
Yeah.
So the one thing, the one restraint he had is gone forever. And like truly truly Wilson is lost. Like this episode is when he becomes Kingpin, basically. Like the man is dissolved into just pure like evil and like carnal power and need, and it's a spectacular villain.
Yeah.
And I forget how much he is just in the rest of the show as well.
Oh yeah. He's he's present all the time.
I think too, like something I've noticed. I mean, that exchange with Leland is great. I think there's something about Leland where he plays it way too cool to start with Fisk. Where I'm like, dude, he knows. the second Leland's like trying to be, he says he comes out with some line. It's like during the blackmail, where he's like, he comes out with this line of like, you know, $10 million buys you a lot of courage or whatever. And I was like, you're playing this too cool. Fisk is gonna absolutely kill you. Like I think there's something about him being casual about it, that made me go, oh, this is the wrong play for this moment. I can't put my finger on it. I had that intuition of like, if he had treated Fisk with more respect or reverence in this moment, maybe he gets to live.
Maybe. I thought his fuck up was saying to Fisk that he's going to steal half his money. Maybe if he didn't say that, Fisk would have let him go. But
why would you admit that? Just do it. Like,
yeah, like from Fisk's point of view, like, you know, he tried to kill your girlfriend, but she survived. You know, maybe you can let that go. But if you're stealing half his money, that's like his power, and so he's got nothing to lose at that point. Like, you know, he may as well kill Leland and try to mitigate this Hoffman debacle.
Well, he's got that whole other half of the money he can use to try and fix it, right? Like, it's kind of a no-brainer to kill Leland. Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty spectacular way to kill the last kind of henchman, I think. He just like, he starts beating him, and then he just like Leland tases him, and then Fisk just like freaks out for a minute, and then just like grabs him and just throws him down the elevator shaft. It's crazy.
He and the lighting in that scene is like so, I don't know, it has such a, everyone looks like a silhouette. And there's that scene after Fisk gets tased, because, you know, he's like, he's contracting like this, and he's just like this fucking lump of a man. He's like screaming this primal scream. Man, if I were Leland, it's GG's at that point. Like,
I'm running, bro. I'm out of here. I mean, talk about getting done. I feel like that might be the most, I was gonna say that's not the most brutal death. The henchman early on who like impales himself on like a rusted pike because he says Fisk's name. I think that takes the cake for like, until season 2 when we get the Punisher. I think that's the most brutal death so far.
Yeah, I mean the decapitation with the car door is, you know, that's up there.
That's pretty rough.
Yeah.
Just,
it's not really a decapitation. It's more of a smushing kind of pulping action.
A spine smush. I also like the way that I mean, there's some other stuff in this. You could tell that the guys writing this really don't like rich people. There's a line that Matt has where they get together and they're putting this case together, and Matt says something like, Owsley's a man of financial privilege. I never met one that used his own money when he could use someone else's. And my note says, this is the most Marxist shit I've ever read. But it's very true. And I like that he makes that call. And he's like, yeah, of course Leland would use Fisk's money to cover up Fisk's own... like, of course he's that fucking dumb. Like, when you're that rich, you don't think about stuff. And that obviously ends up being the thread that they pull on. Which lets them work out, okay, we need to target, what's the cop's name? Something starts with S.
The cop that they're friends with?
Yeah, Mahoney, right? I don't know what his first name is.
Brett Mahoney?
Brett Mahoney.
Yeah.
It's like one of those like, of course Owsley's like sort of lack of being in touch with how of the reality of the situation is what leads them to this final clue, which gives them the kind of connective tissue they need. And then Matt obviously overhears the Hoffman thing. It's just one of those like cool little details, I think.
Yeah, and then the next scene, like how they really go into detail about like the clues that they're following and like how they get to the next point and stuff. You know, they see a list of all of Silver and Brent's holdings. There's one less the next day, but the amount of money they have hasn't changed. And so yeah, it's like there's a lot of as I said, process. You know,
we love to see it. Process is our favorite thing. If you want a show that's just all process, you can also watch Andor, because that's all that show is, and it's excellent. Or of course, Saul. That's a very processy show as well.
What show?
Better Call Saul.
Oh right, yeah, of course.
Yeah. One thing I did want to ask your opinion about is we were kind of talking about throughout this season that this idea of like there is the plot itself is quite mundane, and then the themes are quite sort of heady and like sort of it's thinking about like sort of religious epics a lot. The actual plot of this episode is very like A causes B, which causes C, which causes D. Like, you know, in this sequence, right? They go, okay, Hoffman is the object of desire. Then it's, how do we find him? Okay, we follow Owsley's accounts. And then it's like, okay, now that we found the accounts, how do we track Owsley? Okay, well, like it's very, very procedural and mundane, and like it's sort of execution. But then it relies on them going to Mahoney, the you know, only honest cop in Gotham sort of thing. And the kinship between Mahoney as a law enforcement officer and Nelson and Murdoch as lawyers is like they're all on the same side, even though they're doing different jobs. Like they're on the side of the righteous, and they're on the side of the good, I guess.
Yeah.
And the plan only works because Mahoney is that kind of person. Like you can have all the procedural rhetoric that you want and all of the process that you want, but it only comes off if the right people do the right things.
Yeah. I don't know maybe the right word for it, but this is the point where the show is obligated to get optimistic, because you know, it's the same episode where he gets the costume, and well, I mean, it's not its fault, but you know, it is a superhero show, and you know, you gotta they were probably given a few parameters. You know, he has to get the costume, he has to, you know, save the day and stuff like that. This is where the show you know, becomes sort of introduces the camp a bit more, and so, but that's the great thing about this show, is that it does the absolute best it can within those parameters. And so the fact that like the plot resolves itself by all the righteous people working together, you know, and facing off against evil, it's like that is just a product of it being a show called Daredevil adapted from a comic book. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's like a genre requirement almost.
It always sounds like whenever I say stuff like this, like I'm like using all these words like comic books and as pejoratives, but I'm not. Like I'm not. I don't know.
Look, comics are goofy, all right? Comics are fucking goofy, and if you think comic books are cool, you're a fucking idiot. Comics have always been goofy as shit, okay? And you have to be able to admit it to like comic books. There are just goofy things out there, and like, yeah, the suits are goofy, and like the hero saving the day can be cheesy and camp, and like, but you can do that well, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess my point with that was like, you can't really have a really fucking bold and ambitious ending with all these like complicated themes that make you think about shit. Instead, what we get is what you've been saying. You know, the good guys fight the bad guys because the good guys are good in their soul and the bad guys aren't. And it does a really, really, really good job of working that in those parameters that they have.
Yeah, and I mean, like, part of it too is like, we know that we also know that like Matt, what I really love is the way that they get to pull on some of these Batman threads a little bit throughout the show. We've been talking about it, but like Matt isn't. He's not only good. Like Foggy might be, Mahoney might be, but Matt is not. Matt is like one bad day away. And there's a way in which like that. It's not. I was trying to think of a way to articulate this. When I was writing this in my notes last night, it's not that, like, it is no accident that Matt does not have the relationship with Mahoney. It's Foggy. They have the relationship. Matt benefits from it, and they certainly are. Like, I wouldn't say that Mahoney and Matt are friends. I would say Foggy and Mahoney are friends.
Yeah.
And that's because they are the good ones, and Matt is the one willing to do what is necessary. He is the one who will, stare into the abyss and not flinch. Because it does take, you sometimes have to fight fire with some fire, but where's that line, and how do you manage mitigating what that does to your soul? And we've talked about it. Like Matt's biggest risk isn't mortal jeopardy; it's damnation. Right? He could die and die an honest death, but that would be no small consolation if he did something that damned him forever. And so I think there's a way in which it gets to undercut how goofy and camp it could be, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right, like it's in comparison to most other stuff like this, it's quite subversive, is what you mean?
Yeah, and I guess sometimes when we use the word subversive, it can, I think it sometimes gets used to mean genre redefining, or like I think some people think it's like, oh, you like trick the audience and they're surprised or whatever. But like subversion is really just about going, okay, well, we know what the requirement is here structurally, or perhaps from like a genre perspective, or perhaps from like a structural, like, the fact that you're making a TV show, for example. So, paratextual reasons. And like, it's really about going, how do we swing this in a way that is going to achieve the necessary means, but do it in a surprising and interesting way. But surprise doesn't have to be like, oh my god, I'm so surprised. Like it can just be like really thought provoking and like careful.
It's kind of like just adding another layer of theme or idea into something like familiar, and it's kind of like I don't know, math with story concepts or something. It's like an addition of something else, and it creates this new sort of feeling in a story.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, it's another tool in the toolbox. I'm just really wary of how people use it these days. They say subversive, but it's not what they mean. You know what I mean?
There's a great case study in subversion in the Game of Thrones, HBO Game of Thrones show.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll make an article about that one day, I swear.
Yeah. One day. A few things I've noted down here. Turk gets got by the FBI, and I was like, that's our boy.
I loved it when he showed up and the opera music playing in the background.
Like,
that's
no.
all I needed.
He's so
That's all I needed.
Oh, it's so funny. The whole time I was like, not our boy. I really like this detail. And I can't express why, other than it's just that subversion thing again, which is like you get this dude, this old white guy getting pulled out of his car, and you pan across and you realize that it's Marcy's boss. And I was like, huh. Like, I was grinning. Like, she has this little smile of relief, and I was grinning from ear to ear. I was like, fuck yeah. Like, this show just gets it right, man. Like, little moments, like, it's little details like that where you go, oh yeah, like, Marcy there's a reason why she and Foggy are compatible. It puts in the legwork with the little details to prove out these bigger concepts and bigger swings and bigger ideas. Like, it is possible to wear the pumps and the fancy dresses and do the big time job and still retain your humanity and realize that there are jobs worth doing and there are fights worth fighting. And there's a reason that like she's a good match for Foggy, and it's moments like this. I just thought it was a really good detail.
Yeah, it's stuff that you notice on like a rewatch, is like bits of characterization that seem inconsequential on a first time around.
Patrick said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
There's some sort of religious sort of pun here that this is the audience participation section. Feel free to create that in your own head and
Yeah.
pretend I said it.
Pretend Pat said a really clever one and that it was funny.
Yeah.
And you think of what it is, and then you go, wow, Pat, good job. You say, Pat, that's the funniest thing I've heard in a long time. You guys go ahead. That's your homework for this week. We haven't given you homework yet, but that's what it is. So
You want us to do the analysis and the jokes? Get the fuck out of here.
the closest I could do to a joke was saying that Pat would get shot first. Like that's the one joke we get this episode, all right?
Well past our quota. Anyway.
Yeah. Can you remind me of the sequencing of this? So basically, like, he proposes to Odessa in the weirdest arrest sequence I've ever seen. Just the vibes are way wrong with Fisk here. It's the big horny romantic man is not a vibe I'm interested in. It's so weird, and he's
horny.
Like, he's giving her the ring, and he's like Vanessa, and he's like trying to kiss her, and I'm like, I don't like any of this. They're like pulling him away, and I'm like, no, I don't want to see this.
No, it's romantic. What are you talking about?
No, I'm kidding. But so that happens. They put him in a truck, and then he basically gets like, he does his monologue, and then he gets busted out by his dudes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then we obviously have Matt and the gang celebrating, drinking bourbon, and celebrating too early, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about his monologue. So Fisk is sitting in this truck, and he's got these two FBI SWAT team guys, and he's like, there's this. I was thinking about the story from the Bible, and one of the dudes is like, "Can you not talk?" And the other guy's like, "Nah, what harm could it do?" And I immediately went, "That's a bit too friendly, isn't it?" My radar was like, And he tells this I guess it's like it's a parable, really, is what he does. He says, quote,
I was thinking about a story from the Bible.
I tell you to open your mouth.
Let him talk. Don't mean nothing.
I'm not a religious man, but I've read bits and pieces over the years. Curiosity more than faith. About this one story. There was a man, he was traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was set upon by men of ill intent. And they stripped the traveler of his clothes, they beat him, and they left him bleeding in the dirt. And the priest happened by. Saw the traveler. They moved to the other side of the road and continued on. And then a Levite, a religious functionary, he came to the place, saw the dying traveler. But he too moved to the other side of the road and passed him by. But then came a man from Samaria, a Samaritan, a good man. He saw the traveler bleeding in the road, and he stopped to aid him without thinking of the circumstance or the difficulty it might bring him. The Samaritan tended to the traveler's wounds, applying oil and wine. And he carried him to an inn, gave him all the money he had for the owner to take care of the traveler. As the Samaritan, he continued on his journey. He did this simply because the traveler was his neighbor. He loved his city and all the people in it. I always thought that I was the Samaritan in that story. It's funny, isn't it? How even the best of men can be deceived by their true nature.
The hell does that mean?
It means that I'm not the Samaritan. That I'm like the priest or the Levite. That I am the ill intent who set upon the traveler on a road that he should not have been on.
and this fucking This gives me goosebumps every time. This monologue fucking rules. And D'Onofrio's delivery when he says that I am the ill intent, I'm like, I got goosebumps thinking about it right now. Like the pulling on the religious threads again and like really making it clear. You know, he's not a religious man, but he's always thinking about it.
Yeah. I like the I like that detail about how he's like, I am the ill intent who set upon a traveler on the road that he shouldn't have been on. Like, that's so interesting. The road that he shouldn't have been on. Like, just thinking about like how that parallels with Daredevil. It's just like, you know, he's kind of got like a god complex, as if like, you know, he like this guy dare defy me sort of thing. And now that he's accepted his role as a force of evil nature, he has no apprehensions about, you know, just like being evil and crushing him now.
There's still an element of like, I agree, and there's a fascinating kind of like paradox there as well, because like you say, he says on a road that he should not have been on. So there's a way in which he's sort of like, he's still kind of able to blame everyone else for the fact that he's like, this is just my nature, and if these people weren't on the wrong path, they wouldn't be getting hurt. We think about Ben, right? Ben gets killed because he dares to visit Wilson's mother. Matt has absolutely no business fighting crime. He's a blind guy, and yet here he is. Foggy just wants to do cases and make money. He has no business building this case. Mahoney has his mother to take care of. Why is he stepping out of the queue and not taking the bribes, right? Hoffman shouldn't be alive, right? He should already be dead. Like, he is on a road he should not have been on. There are so many ways in which the show is thinking about it, like so many ways here in which the show is thinking about how Fisk relates to everything that's happened so far.
Yeah.
Without that
it's
extra
like,
sentence, it's so different.
It's super. It's like those are psychopathic tendencies, right? To think like that, to think that like the objectively evil things that you're doing are, well, you know, fuck, all these people are getting in my way, stop me from doing these things. Like, that is actually, you know, how the mind of like a psychopath works.
It also mirrors the story that Lantham tells earlier, where he's talking about the warlord who goes and kills like the holy man, like the holiest man of the town or whatever. And, you know, he's like, you know, that day, you know, I saw the face of the devil. So yes, I think the devil walks among us. And, you know, later on, Matt goes to him and he says, you know, why would God put the devil in me? And in this episode, Matt takes ownership of the fact that this is a part of himself that he's willing to try and control. And Fisk is going, this is a part of me, and I'm going to let it control me. And it's your fault if you get in the way. And it's such a like and like Matt is doing the same thing. Well, Matt is doing the opposite. He's taking control of it and deciding to put himself in harm's way to help other people. They're such great foils for each other, and it's just like this is an absolute touchdown of a monologue. It's so good, and it's the loss of his humanity as well. Yeah, and sometimes this show just goes like really balls to the walls with the language it uses, and then, you know, that speech, I don't know, a Levite, a religious functionary, like, it's just such a, I don't know, the syllables in that phrase just, they tickle my brain, and then having it delivered by D'Onofrio in that sort of like hoarse whisper voice as well, like, yeah, man, it slaps. It's so good. Fisk talks the way that I write books sometimes, where he's like, what is the way in which I can describe something and make it alien, even though it's familiar? Like, everybody knows the story of the Good Samaritan. Even if you haven't read the Bible, you know the shape of this story. Everybody does. But the way that he doesn't say, oh yeah, and he bandaged him. He says, you know, he tended to the traveler's wounds, applying oil and wine. And that's like, well, you would only know that if you've read the Bible, right? Like these are specific details from the accounts in the Bible. And so there is a way in which like he's taking this, like functionary is such a specific turn of phrase. It changes, it makes you pay attention to details you wouldn't otherwise, which is really the function of like that's why you choose different words when something else would do, right? Is it changes the rhythm, the rhythmic emphasis that the sentences have, which in turn changes where you place the most amount of significance, which changes how you perceive its meaning. So here, like when he's talking about, he doesn't say the Samaritan didn't think about the fact that like there were bandits that attacked this guy and he could be in danger and they could come back any minute. He says he aided him without thinking of the circumstances or difficulty it might bring him. That's him talking about himself, right? He's saying like, I thought I was doing that. I thought I was risking my own safety to help people despite the difficulty there, despite how these people in the city are constantly creating problems for me. Like he's able to abstract certain details to make it about himself and then call your attention to other specifics that, it just change. It's like, it changes the impact this has, I think. Makes it super, it was like what you said before, makes it super character specific. It's like, a writing exercise that we used to do in writing class is like, you take one thing that happened, or a story, for example, and then you have all of the characters from your story describe it to another character. So you have like a character you invent and you have them all describe the same events, and how they describe it should tell you who those characters are and what their deal is. And this very much feels like the authors of this show really understanding like what that functionally means. And who Fisk is in comparison, not just who Fisk is, but how he sees himself in relation to everybody else, which is what you were saying, like that psychopathic tendency is really clear here.
Yeah.
Scene rules.
It's such economy with their dialogue.
It's a 40-minute episode, and they get this in there. Like, goddamn, it's it's so good. And the fact that one of the guys in the truck is paid off, is like one of Fisk's dudes, and they both just sit there like in rapt silence, and then the one guy's like, what the hell does that mean? And I'm like, shut up, like you don't know what you're doing, like this is gonna break bad so fast, and then it breaks bad so quickly. It's so well paced. If you I'll drop the entire scene in, but it's definitely probably one of my favorite scenes of the show so far, by a country mile. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, and I don't know, just the fact that like it's the finale, it's like framed as a revelation. It has all the properties of like a climax, and paired with everything else that goes on in this episode as well. It's just so climactic, man. It's so much energy concentrated into this one like bit. Yeah, it's so cool.
And I like the fact that the climax is not. It's the climax is partly the action, but the action is really background. Like when Fisk is escaping and he's walking through the street, the camera is on him, and it's about him escaping. It's not about like, oh, look at all the money we spent on this bridge action. Like it's and the shootout. It's very character focused even still.
And the way they film Fisk like walking across the bridge, the music that kicks in, like how his coat billowing in the wind, and oh man, it's so cool. Yeah, you're right. It is just like so character focused. Yeah.
The show also loves putting D'Onofrio on a big coat and having him get out of a truck. That happens a lot in this show, and it's cool every time.
It is smart decision.
Yeah, he's such a presence.
Yeah.
It's one thing I will say is like the costuming in this episode is really good. You get Matt with a very cool scarf. Matt and Karen.
I was going to mention his scarf.
Matt and Karen go to that funeral and look like they are here to impress. They're on some like Gucci shit for real. Like it's their fit is fire. And yeah, that scarf he's wearing, like, man, there's these good looking people in this show.
Yeah.
One thing I will say too, just before we get to the big punchies, is there's a sequence where, so like Matt and Karen and Foggy are toasting to their success, and they realize they have like a laptop playing the news. They realize that Fisk is he's breaking out of custody. And Foggy's like, hey, we better get cabs home before they close down the city, which is the most like big city thing I've ever heard. Like a lot of people who live in places like Brisbane wouldn't necessarily get this, but if you live in a big city like that, you're like, well, if they close down that road, that's all the traffic's getting diverted. That's like half of the city. It's gonna be fucking gridlock. It's usually like, oh, I better get home now. And that's like the most New York thing I've ever heard. It's a nice little detail, and it also gives Matt the convenient opportunity to head off to Potter's workshop. What I like is, I was thinking, we've been talking a lot about like decisions that other shows would make when this show makes a decision, and Matt gets in a cab and they ask where he's headed, and then it cuts away back to Fisk's action, and a different show would have him be like, take me to Potter and Son's garage, you know.
Superhero costumes incorporated.
Yeah. Take me to whoever the character is that in The Incredibles that makes all the super suits. But there's a like, what I like is that it cuts. It's where's he headed, and then it cuts to the gunfight and Fisk. That's ultimately where he's headed, but that's not where he's taking the cab to.
Yeah.
It's so the language of filmmaking here is so legible. That's like the number one word for everything in this episode. It's very, very legible. They've done a very clever job of making the things that need to be legible and focusing on the right details. And that all comes back to the rhythm and the pacing. Like you were saying at the start, the structure of this episode is just, it's on point.
There is an awesome line by Matt. I can't remember when it is specifically, but Foggy's, being like, are you really gonna, be a superhero again? And then Matt says, this is where the law meets reality.
Yeah, I wrote that down as well.
Yeah. Such a good little, little microcosm of the unique flavor of this show in terms of superhero media. Obviously being a lawyer vigilante is is unique even in comparison to like Batman, So yeah, I loved that line in the finale, no less.
It's also a really good character detail for these two. Again, like it's that beat of Foggy slowly starting to not accept, but understand maybe where Matt's coming from.
Yeah.
And I think there's a really important delineation that the show ends up thinking about in the future, which is like, what is the difference between accepting something and understanding it? Like, where is that line, and like, what is your relationship with other people when it comes to like actually understanding decisions they're making versus like accepting them for who they are? Obviously becomes a really big piece with the next season, which I don't want to spoil for anyone. Another question I had that I want to talk about before we get to the kind of finale, and then I guess our general thoughts on the season, and then next season. When he gets in the cab and he goes to visit Potter, they have a very brief conversation where he's like, "Hey, I need the suit, dude." And Potter says, I didn't write down the exact words. He basically says something like, the black part, my treatment isn't finished yet. The black parts are the strongest points, or whatever, like the red parts, and maybe will block a knife or something.
Depending on the angle.
And it's such a good detail, and again, I don't want to spoil anything, given what they do early on next season with the suit, it gives them this I'm not sure like latitude to change it if they need to, which is really smart because I think as a showrunner you have to be terrified of how people are going to receive this. Because the Man in Black look becomes iconic for this show, like and you put him in the Daredevil costume
as per there
you go, see as per the thumbnail. All Crystal's high. I didn't do any of it. That's all Crystal. I just did the Crystal. Go follow her work. Her links are in the show notes. She does all of our artwork. Incredibly talented. Far more talented than either of us and will ever be as well, which is good to know about us. I like the fact that they give themselves a little lampshade to be like, just in case we're gonna hang this right here, and if people hate it, we'll come back and fix it. And they do make some pretty smart choices next season of details they change that I think make it a little bit less doofy. And something that they do as well, something I wish they had done in this episode is damage the suit a little more. I don't know why, other than I think when it's weathered and damaged in the next season, it works a lot better. There's something about new suit look that I think is always doofy.
Well, I mean, it is a new suit though.
I know,
like, you just got it.
I know, but maybe the treatment process, does something to it that makes it look. I don't know. Maybe I've just been Batman pilled too much by the Batman, but like that suit is the most like constantly being repaired, put together looking thing of my entire life. And I just want more of that on my superhero outfits.
Batman pilled.
What else would you call it?
True. What, like, you mean the Batman costumes always look really weathered and like sort of beaten up and stuff?
Specifically in the Batman, it looks like he is just constantly putting that thing back together.
Yeah, I suppose.
It's kind of like it looks like it's industrial and put together with like spare parts and like I don't know. There's a quality to it that and like every conceivable seam and edge that could like that would be weathered or be exposed is scuffed up and like points of high impact are constantly scuffed up and things like that. And I know that they did up the suit, but
that's just a symptom of the film being like this really like textured, constantly rainy rubble.
Really unpleasant.
Like what's that?
Really unpleasant place to live.
Yeah. Like that film has such a texture to it, and it's like you obviously got to match the suit with that. Gotham
in the Batman seems like both the coldest city in the world to live in and also the sweatiest at the same time, and I don't know how that's possible.
Yeah,
it's like if it's not raining, it's humid, and if it's raining, it's cold. But then you're like, well, but it's super cold. I don't want it to be cold. But then when it's not cold, it's like sweaty and sticky. Like there's never a good day in Gotham City. I don't think.
No.
The weather forecast is just shit.
You're constantly smothered in like smog and shit like that. Yeah. It's
Batman's really good. We will eventually one day do a show about it, but I want to put some distance between us and the film before we do like a 8-hour analysis or something. I know Rybold is like chomping at the bit to do it, so look out for that in my future. Maybe before or after Pat and I eventually commit to doing an Assassin's Creed show.
What?
It'll take us
Assassin's Creed show?
It'll take us 8 years of our lives to complete. You better hope the book I write off the back of that one's good. Okay, so let's talk about the final confrontation then, unless you have anything before that.
No, let's talk about it.
Okay, so can you set this up for me? Because I had forgotten until I watched it how short this actual fight is. Especially compared to
about a minute.
Yeah, especially compared to how arduous the rest of some of these meals. I mean, it's brutal, but like a lot of the fight sequences in this show are like dudes slugging it out and getting up and falling down and getting up again. And this is like 3 beats basically.
It's like one reversal and then like counter reversal, in terms of like who has the edge in the fight, and then that's it. Yeah. And I don't know. I more to the my earlier point about the show having to hit all the points of like a superhero show and camp and stuff. This needs to be momentous and I don't know, the hero needs to win like very clearly and absolutely, it can't be it can't be that fight from episode 2 or 3 in the hallway. This is got to be pretty decisively a victory for Daredevil.
Yeah, I think that's the key as well, especially if you think about the last time that Fisk just rocked his fucking shit from the ground up. Obviously, it was a pretty unfair fight. But you get you get the impression with these two clashing that like someone's gonna win quickly or Fisk is gonna win.
Yeah, well, and that's what I like about it too, is that it makes a lot of sense because in that last fight, like Matt was he was half dead, he was stabbed and beaten and stuff, and now that he's at his full strength, he absolutely demolishes Fisk, which is like such a cool action detail. And it's a reversal of that fight in a lot of ways. They even swap lines when he says like, "I'm gonna kill you," and then Daredevil says, "Take your shot." It's kind of cool.
Pat, I didn't realize that. That's such a good detail. God, the show's so good. One thing I really like is Fisk completely loses control here, and Matt doesn't. He is channeling the devil. He's got it under control. Candidly, he just has an answer for everything Fisk is throwing at him.
This won't change anything. You think one man in a silly little costume will make a difference?
And there's a really great sequence where it seems like Matt's on the ropes and he gets up and he goes into like boxing mode and he just goes like doof 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 doof, and then he does a big kick, but it's like this decisive like battling jack, like it's such a good little just like sequence of string of punches, and it's ultimately what gets him the upper hand and then lets him get the club and win. And there's the character motivations and the action are so, like I was saying before, very, very legible here. Even if the action isn't designed to be, you're not necessarily supposed to understand how each blow is connecting. It's more about who is in control and who wants it more. Like, and it is really that emotional melee as much as it is obviously the physical brutality. Yeah, and then Matt goes, God, at the end he goes, "This is my city, my family." Oh, Matt Murdock just absolutely owning the shit out of Fisk here rules. Very, very well earned beatdown, I feel.
Oh yeah.
So Fisk goes to so Mahoney rocks up and he's like, "Hey, put your hands up, man." And then he's like, "Oh, it's you. Shit. Thanks, man." Like, and they have that little moment of respect, which is kind of cool. Yeah,
it's it's Batman. It's the Gordon Batman relationship.
Oh shit, it is. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, it is. He lowers the gun for the first time, and he's like, "Hey, you're all right. You're an okay guy.
You're a friend of the police."
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I mean, there is one last detail that I did want to talk about as well, which is the Fisk goes to prison, and the show has the absolute audacity to finish with a detail that I was like, oh, wow, which is Fisk goes to prison, and he's sitting in his bunk, and he's staring at the wall, and it's like the identical texture to the wall that his dad made him look at as a kid, and it's very, very similar to Rabbit in Snowstorm. Yeah. And I was like, the the audacity to be this good at writing, it's like kind of rude at a certain point. Like the way that it holds on it, I just sat there and I was like, damn.
Yeah.
Damn. Like it just makes you go, wow. Like it's a real spectacular detail. I don't know. I'm not sure why. Like I can't really explain why, other than it obviously comes back later. It becomes a detail about Fisk that we obviously are always thinking about. But like it just connects all of this visually, thematically, and gives you something to think about, even as it ends. It's like it holds on it and then it goes, this is important. Think about Fisk, this psychopath, staring at this wall. Think about his relationship with Vanessa. Think about his relationship to the art. Think about his relationship to Rabbit and Snowstorm and his father's death and the first time he killed someone. And then it ends.
The show insists on not stopping, like, understanding and developing Fisk as a character. Like, it's... that's what that kind of says to me. It's sort of like that typical... the cliche of, like, the Marvel post-credit scene where it's setting up for something more. But, like, this is how it should be. Like, it's telling you, like... It's just so enthusiastic about, like... you thought, like, this was the finale of Fisk? No, he's still got a lot more interesting stuff to let you know about.
Yeah, this psychopath you're terrified of, don't worry, he's not done. You know?
Yeah, like, there's still a lot more character that is yet to be revealed. And it's true, like, in seasons 2 and 3, like, you still get more insight into him somehow. And, yeah.
It's kind of...
It's good shit.
It's kind of a magic trick they get to pull that I... You know, if we think about, like, a similar show, like, I've been talking about Andor a lot, and, like, because that's top of mind, but, like, Madnet is another good example where you think that you've worked out Don Draper every single time, every season. You're like, I've worked out this guy. I've worked out who Dick Whitman is. I know who he is. And then he will do something, and you learn some other part of his life or his backstory or his childhood, and you go, maybe I don't know him. Like, maybe I actually don't know him. And then he'll do something, and you're like, huh. And he just, like, they refuse to let him not develop. And I think, to your point, like, this isn't a cliffhanger. This is it's like a coda almost, where it's not saying, hey, come back next season to see more Fisk. It's like, hey, this guy is still, this has changed him, and we don't know how yet. Yeah. And that's like, and that's it's punctuating the ending with that thought of, like, in the same way that the devil being called Daredevil is going to change Matt. We don't know how. This moment will change Fisk, and we don't know yet. And even if there wasn't another season, it would still work.
I've noticed that in like art, where it's a really effective way to elicit, like, some strong emotions about a story you've just watched, where you have a character that's this, like, you bookend your story by having it similar or run parallel to how it was at the beginning of the story, like, whether that be, like, a setting or a shot or something like that. And yeah, and in fact, the first time we see Fisk, he's looking at this painting, right? And then the last shot, we see him looking at this painting. And so it entices you to think about the journey, like, everything you've seen about him. I wish I can think of some examples of, like, films that do that. But it definitely is like I guess it's a trope, but it's more of a storytelling device, a really effective one. But yeah, I've definitely seen that, like, quite a bit. And it always works.
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes back to, like, if you think about character arcs and stories, right? It's like, even if it's not literally the old world they're coming back to, there is something that they have to come back to, and it makes you go, oh shit, they've changed.
Well, I guess, like, maybe Frodo in the Shire.
That's a
like,
good one.
you know,
Yep.
yeah, he goes back to the Shire. I mean, in the film, it's a bit different. You know, he goes back, everything's the same, but Frodo himself has been irreparably changed forever, and it's just not the same. You know.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like the like Neo in the Matrix, right? He goes back into the Matrix at the end, and he can fly and shit, and like he's just like a different person. Yeah, and there's a you go back. It's like the hero's journey, right? You go back into the old world, change, like you got what you wanted at but you paid a heavy price for it and learned something. And Fisk is a really fascinating character because what he wants and needs is going to continue to change throughout this show. So is Matt, like so is Foggy, so is everybody, and it's a cool way to, like you said, to bookend it because it makes you go, I wonder what happens to these people next. Like, and not struggling to articulate this because I don't want to sound as pretentious as it is, but it's not the same thing as tune in next time to find out the big, like what we were teasing. Like there, it's such an understated character driven thought, I guess, rather than the example I always give for this is the post credit scene. I think it's before the credits, but it's like the coda of of Batman Begins, which is Jim Gordon fires off the bat signal. A Batman comes over and he's like, "Hey, we found this," and it's a Ziploc bag and it's the Joker's calling card or whatever. And it's not. You don't go, "Ooh, I better tune into the next Batman film to find out." You go, damn, what's this gonna do to Bruce Wayne? What does this mean for him? And it's hard to explain the difference. Like, I can't point to one thing and be like, and that's what makes it, a developmental instead of plot or whatever. They can be both. Like, obviously the Joker thing is both, but I think it's all about restraint and like precision and like what motivates the inclusion and what it makes you think about. Is it drawing on theme or is it just directly plot driven? There's something there and I don't know what it is.
It's just like a different catalyst for imagination. Like, the restraint and this is going to sound really pretentious, but like the discipline of like your art or the discipline of, I guess your artistic abilities and stuff like that. It's much more, tantalizing, to wonder like what this means for your characters in the world, and wanting to see the next installment is a symptom of that rather than wanting to see the next film being the entire makeup of that post-credit scene.
That is, you've perfectly articulated that. Yeah, it's whether or not wanting to see that next thing is the point of it, or as you say, if it's just a symptom of the actual outcome of the decision you've made. There's the ending of Disco Elysium is particularly poignant in that regard, where when that ends, these other cops come over and they're like, "Hey Harry, like let's get you back to the force, buddy. Like, come on, come home." And you can have Harry be like, "No, I'm fucking done with the police. Like, absolutely not." And Kim's like, "Come on, like this. We all know you're coming back to the force. Like, let's go, buddy." And Kim's like, "Maybe you should come with me to Jamrock or something like that." And then it ends, and you go, and it's not. You don't go, "Oh man, I want to play a Disco Elysium 2 so that I can go visit Jamrock with Kim." You go, what does that mean for someone like Harry? This character that we spent all this time with, this complete disaster of a human being. What does that mean that he has something close to a friend who's like, "You should come with me"? Like, there's it means something different in the context of these characters, but also makes you go, "Oh, I'd love to play like a game with Kim in Jamrock or whatever." Like I don't know. There's an industriousness to picking and choosing the exact way that you do this stuff. Something that I've been, we're in the process at the moment. We're about to start accepting manuscripts for Under Ink. I think we will be by the time this comes out. And one of the things about the kind of pre-editorial process I've been doing, I've just been like going to people I know and being like, send me some of your submissions just so I can practice. And what's funny is the difference between the difference between where your story starts and ends, and the strength of your opening and the strength of your conclusion. You can have an opening as good as you want and a conclusion as good as you want, but if they aren't building the same themes throughout, and those two things bookend well, it kind of doesn't matter. So like, if you have a really powerful conclusion that's like really supposed to be poignant or whatever, it's gonna fall flat if the rest of it hasn't done the legwork to earn it. And I think it's exactly what you said, which is it's the discipline to know exactly how much is enough for this to work. Because I don't know how they would do it, because this isn't a bad show, but there is a way in which they could do something similar to this and it would be really goofy, or like it would seem like they're deliberately trying to do like maybe it's like, oh god, yeah, you would do like what a Moffat show would do, which is like, you know, you would cut to a headline of like Fisk has escaped jail or whatever. Or like, you know, 3 weeks later, it's like, you know, Fisk has escaped, or, you know, like, so, you know what I'm saying? Like, you would do something else to be like, and Fisk will be back next season. And it has that restraint and discipline to not.
I can imagine, like, I think some other Marvel films have done this, but like, I don't know, some other inmate comes up to Fisk's cell and he goes, "Oh, I've got an opportunity for you," or something like that. You know, like, yeah.
The Punisher comes over and he's like, "It's me, John Bernthal. Let's hang out."
Yeah.
Or in that Amazing Spider-Man film where the guy just goes down into the like basement full of future films.
The Sinister Six setup. I forgot about that.
And he just like walks around a room with all the equipment, and I'm like, where did this guy get all this stuff? Huh? Where did he get all this
what are you doing with that?
What are you doing, buddy? It's such a good conclusion. Let's talk the whole season. I mean, we're obviously very positive. I think as a season of television, there is so much being done in service of character, and in service of theme, particularly in this religious epic between Matt and Fisk, and the kind of interplay of all these different characters. And I think one thing I want to like note as a big takeaway, thinking about this as a thing that is interested in like philosophy and morality, is that idea that we keep coming back to, which is, you know, Matt's internal compass and internal moral compass, and how that actually interfaces with reality when he's putting into practice his rhetoric and his beliefs and things like that. And same for Fisk. Like, how do these ideas and beliefs actually interact and come to terms with and resolve against reality? And I think like if I don't know if I would say this season is like about one thing, but if you had to point to like the biggest theme of this, I think it really is about that question of exactly what Matt and Lantham are always talking about, which is like, you know, is Matt doing this to save the city, or is he doing this for himself? And it's the same question for Fisk. And is their soul in jeopardy if they're doing it for the wrong reasons? And what does that mean for them individually? Same too for Ben, same too for Karen, same too for Foggy and Wesley as well. And my only gripe with this season still is that bizarre stick tag scene that like sets up something that we never see. Like, it's the only bad thing in this show, IMO.
Yeah. You said it way earlier in the podcast, but the most interesting conflict is not mortal jeopardy, but damnation of your soul. And so other shows have that as a secondary conflict. You know, it's secondary to saving the world. The show is so enthusiastic about like religion and philosophy, and those two areas of thought are so ripe with like turmoil and strife and stuff like that. And yeah, it just gives such a weight to like all the conflict, all the personal conflict in the series. Yeah.
If all of this sounds really interesting to you and you're like, man, I'd love to like invest myself into a piece of media that just is always thinking and talking about this stuff, play Pentiment, because Pentiment is about 15 hours long. It's not very long. It's a very, very reedy game. Like it's basically a book, but that is a game about religion and religious people and religious structures. It is like, I finished it the other week and I have not stopped thinking about it. It's so good. And it has a lot of similar questions of like, is belief in and of itself, is that even meritorious if you're believing for the wrong reasons? Like, what is damnation? What is mortal jeopardy? What is immortal jeopardy? And like, why do people believe? And why does the church exist as a function? And what does that mean? And what does that mean in history as things change? And how does belief change people and places and things like that? And it's one of the few stories that I think is as interested in thinking about this stuff without flinching, as Daredevil, I think. Because, Daredevil, Pentiment, there's very few other things out there which are deeply about this stuff, but aren't made by people who are evangelizing or involved in those practices directly. What I'm skirting around is like, it's not like they're not propaganda, right? They're written by people that understand these things, but are clearly not a part of those institutions anymore, if they ever were. I think it makes a much more interesting thought.
And I haven't played the game, but I looked it up. For those interested, the art style of that game is like, it's like a Dark Ages, like Western Europe sort of tapestry art style. It's so bizarre. It looks so weird.
Well, that's where
I'm
it's
actually
set.
pretty keen to play it.
Yeah.
Sorry?
That's where it's set.
Oh, yeah, okay.
We should, you absolutely should. We should find a way to make some content out of that. We could stream it or something, because it's, I need someone to talk about it with, and no one else I know looks at a video game that is all reading and goes, yeah, that's for me.
That is for me.
We might, by the time you hear this, we might have worked that out. This is like one of the many times where I try and trick Pat into content. But
I'm still, Disco Elysium is still on my to-do list.
Oh man, we should play that together as well. We should just start a series which is like David's narrative bangers, and we just play through all of the reading games.
I have a feeling that will happen because you somehow wrote me into everything.
It's my secret power. I just I'll do the pre-production, and then it's like, oh, that's easy enough, and then you show up and you're like, well, how have we been doing this for 2 years? How did that happen? But yeah, it's like Disco Elysium, Pentiment, Citizen Sleeper, Fallout 2 was like the big narrative bangers, and obviously Fallout New Vegas, but everyone's played that. Cool. Look, I mean, that's all I really wanted to talk about. So without spoiling anything, what should we be thinking about heading into? So we're going to take a little break. So this is complicated because of how time works. By the time you hear this, there won't have been a break because it'll just be a 2-week gap, then the bonus, then a 2-week gap for season 2. But for us, there will be about a month and a half's break between this and season 2, because I planned this properly for once. So what should we be thinking about in the interim when it comes to Daredevil season 2? Obviously, that's your introduction to the Punisher. That's in all the marketing. That's not a spoiler. What would you say is like the big themes we should be starting to think about?
So yeah, if season 1 is all about damnation, season 2 is definitely about redemption. What is redemption? Is it like, can people be redeemed despite what they do? If it's, even if it's something like irredeemable. If this season was like, about going to hell, season 2 is about coming back from hell.
Oh, Patrick Laverne does it in one. There you go. Put that on the bumper sticker. That's it. That's going in the marketing, baby. That's going in the YouTube short, Pat. You've done it.
Nice.
See that on TikTok near you soon. So yeah, I guess a few things that change. Obviously, I've already talked about this. So they start to shake up the writing stuff a little bit. That is a good thing in some ways, but also has some interesting consequences when we get to the Defenders. We've already talked about it. Our viewing order is we're going to do season 2, then we'll do the Defenders. We're not going to do any of the interstitial material, as in like the other Defenders shows. Then we'll do season 3. Then we're going to cover Pat's perspective season 4. Then we're going to do She-Hulk, and then we're going to do if we are not, depending on how this plays out and when Born Again comes out. If Born Again isn't out, then we'll probably cover probably Jessica Jones, because I really like that first season. It's got David Tennant, who we both love. And then Born Again. And then we'll basically cover each episode of Born Again individually as they release. That's kind of the plan, but it will really depend on timing, I guess. So yeah, I mean, like basically to prepare for next time, so you want to watch, I don't know if we've grouped these yet, or if you've reviewed the grouping. I just want to give people the recommendation for season 2. You have a look.
I think the same structure of like 3 episodes.
For the opening, yeah.
Yeah.
So similar to this season. So I guess for next time then, you'll want to watch episodes 14 and 15, which is episode 1 and 2 of season 2 of Daredevil. So that's Bang and Dogs to a Gunfight. Some may notice that the titles in season 2 will now be using red in them rather than black. And then season 3, I haven't thought through because when I conceived of the naming convention for the episodes, I forgot he goes back to the old suit. So fuck me, we'll see what happens. But yeah, we'll work that out. That's all the pre-production you don't see. So it'll be season 2, then the Defenders, then Daredevil season 3. Somewhere in there we'll force Mitchie to watch Elektra. And then
Poor bastard.
Poor bastard. He didn't sign up for this. And then, as I said, She-Hulk. Then I said Pat's perspective, season 4, She-Hulk, and then obviously Born Again. We will also probably, as these get recorded, so the way this will work is as we go on, they will get closer and closer to recording, to releasing. So hopefully, my basic plan, if I've done my production properly, is by the time Born Again comes out, we should be recording an episode and should be releasing the same fortnight, is the general plan. But yeah, that's kind of everything I wanted to touch on. Do you have any final thoughts before we close out season 1, Pat?
Season 1. When this came out, this was like a really exciting time for Marvel. I remember because like having these like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. like recently sort of synced up with the movies, and now this completely, like 180 degree in tone and atmosphere, and but it still referenced the movies, and it's like, oh man, what is the? It was kind of like groundbreaking. Yeah, it's like, what is the MCU going to do? Unfortunately, it didn't turn out too awesome in the end, but it was
a really good one of these.
Yeah.
Also, I was thinking about this before. Imagine this being the first one they did. Are you kidding me? Like,
yeah, I know. That's exactly why the future looked really bright for Marvel. It's like, oh, and it was this, and then Jessica Jones, and then this season 2, and it's like, holy shit! Like Marvel's onto some shit here.
And that first season of Jessica Jones is so good.
Yeah. Like, so bro, it was looking like some real, like, I don't know, artistic ingenuity from Marvel for a time.
Well, and then Luke Cage ruled, and then Iron Fist happened. And everyone went, I don't know if
I don't know about this.
And then the Defenders was like, all right, okay. And then obviously Daredevil season 3 is just tremendous, but very different. It's interesting.
You can feel it. You can feel how different it is when you watch it.
Yeah. Also, the budget goes way up, which helps change the tone a little bit. But yeah, I mean, like the other thing, I guess. Do you have any off the top recommendations for stuff similar to this season, or stuff that's made you think about? I always try and include, anytime we mention something, I try and include it in the comments of the video, the episodes themselves. But is there anything that like you go, oh man, if you really like this, you should check out XYZ?
I mean, yeah, kind of related. It makes me think about the comic All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison in terms of superhero stories that are really concerned with the fabric of you as a person, your being, and what the truly important conflicts are in life is like not the punching the bad guys, but rather the living part. As Father Lantern says, you know, it's not death that scares him, it's living that scares. Yeah, it's living that scares the hell out of him. Have you read that comic, David?
Yeah, I have. That's one of my favorite Superman comics, along with Superman for Tomorrow, which is a very similar comic, and in fact involves a priest. So
there you go.
If you like priests and religion, and you like thinking about superheroes in this way, Superman for Tomorrow is also a good one. Yeah, All-Star Superman, absolutely excellent comic book, just crackling. And I guess like maybe like the first few volumes of the Walking Dead comic as well are very chiefly concerned with a lot of this stuff. Probably like if you think about comic books, those would be Batman Year One as well, obviously, which is what this is riffing off. And then like I'm trying to think of other stuff. I mean, obviously Andor is, you should just watch Andor.
Yes, you should.
I'm trying to think other stuff related. There's just other shows I like, but I'm like, that doesn't really relate. I was like The Bear, but like that doesn't have anything to do with this. It's just good. Yeah, maybe Andor is going to be my big pick. Andor and Pentiment would be the big two. And if you're not a big reader, maybe watch us, who knows, play Pentiment. Because I think it's very, very interested in the same religious stuff that this is. And has a similar kind of obsession, I guess, and like preoccupation with damnation and maybe like Midnight Mass as well. If you haven't seen that, that's very, 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 very similar in its themes and what it's thinking about, and also very short. It's like 7 episodes. Midnight Mass is so good. And I'm just listing shows that are good. But yeah, I mean, look, we'll include those in the show notes. We'll try and do that at the end of every season, because I think sometimes it can be hard to go, man, I really like that. What else should I watch? And people go, oh, have you seen Succession? And you're like, yeah. Have
you seen The Boys?
Yeah, you're like, yeah, it's one of the most popular shows. That's not helping me at all. So we'll try and do that at the end of each season, because it's something that the Superculture Review guys did, I think, at the end of one of their shows, and it was very helpful in kind of helping me find other stuff that I was interested in. So we'll try and maintain it. But hey, that's been us. We appreciate the heck out of people watching. Patrick, where do people find you on the internet? If they said to themselves, I want to consume more of Patrick's thoughts, more of his philosophy, more of his filmic opinions.
Oh, well, you're in luck then.
Oh, man.
I've actually got the whole channel.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I run it with my mate Mitchie. It's called A Method to the Madness. You can find it on Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, and Stitcher. We also have a website, AMTTM.com. Stands for A Method to the Madness. And we cover mostly Breaking Bad / Better Call Saul content. We're going to cover some more things, like Westworld, in the near future, most likely.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's cool, because I appreciate about Westworld, they made one season and then had the intelligence to stop making it, because there's only one season of Westworld, so... Very clever of them to do that. Look, you should definitely go check that out. The guys recently did, not recently, when this comes out, this will date this. The guys a long time ago, the guys put out a D&D morality video on Breaking Bad, and it is fascinating. Like, I've said this, I was making fun of him for it the other night, but like, Mitchie is the most literal man on the planet. It's like his superpower. And that every conversation that you guys have is at once very funny and thought-provoking. Definitely go check that out on the YouTube channel. And yeah, but by the time you hear this, I'll have schemed Pat into doing something with Pentiment or Disco Elysium, so I'll include links to that as well.
But by then, hopefully, we'll have a we'll have a Breaking Bad theory tier list out.
Ooh.
So that's going to be the next project.
Theory.
Yeah.
What do you mean theory tier list? Like people like fan theory? Like what does that mean?
Yeah. So fan theories, and we rank them based on like how credible they are, how much they make sense, how much they add to the world, how much we like them personally, like that kind of stuff.
Okay, check that out. That sounds really interesting. Turns out thinking about Breaking Bad rules. It's a good show. Better Call Saul, somehow better. Don't know how you pull that off. Feels like showing off to me, frankly.
Yeah, for real.
So good. Better Call Saul is so good. And it's short as well, which I love. Anyway, okay, we're gonna get out of here. If you want to support what we do, you can find us at ZeroIndent.com, where you can find all of our articles. You can find us at patreon.com/ZeroIndent. You can chuck in $1 to help support what we do. It takes a lot of time behind the scenes, pre-production planning, research. We appreciate it. Helps us do more of it as well. Helps us prioritize more of our time to do it. And wherever you consume this show, if you have the ability to, please go ahead and give us a review, a comment, or an engagement on your platform of choice.
He's dying. He's dying because you weren't subscribed to the podcast. You guys did this.
I just choked on air. I took in a breath and was like, "What the fuck?" Anyway, I don't know what happened there.
Like and subscribe to Save David.
I'm allergic to a lack of reviews. The lack of 5-star reviews is killing me. You can also go find all of our merch and books at Underink at underink.press. Underink.press, which is our independent publisher that we started under ZeroIndent to publish upcoming works of science fiction, academic works, fantasy, and non-academic works that no one else will touch. We endeavor to start publishing other people's stuff soon as well. But if you fancy grabbing yourself a t-shirt related to the show, you can do so at underink.press. They will be up by the time the first episode goes out. So you'll probably heard a promo for that during our breaks and stuff, but definitely go do that. Buying merch is actually one of the best ways to help support the show. We don't make a ton of percentage on those, but it helps us with visibility, and it is direct cash in our pocket, which really helps us prioritize more of this. So go check that out. Crystal did all the artwork for this. You can find her links in the show notes. We will be back next time. In the feed, you'll hear the bonus episode with Mitchie, and then we'll be back for season 2. We appreciate your support. This was a really fun season. I'm so excited for more Daredevil. Like, I just want to watch more of the show, and I'm making us take a break so we pace ourselves. But I'm thrilled to dig into more of this. So stop by next season. And a little bit of a spoiler, you'll get to see Crystal's season 2 art, which is even cooler. So you can continue to be impressed by the talent that we lack. We'll catch you guys next time. Thanks again for watching or listening. Patrick, take us out with something pithy and thoughtful and clever, like you're famous for, you know?
Oh, okay. Put me on the spot. Why
Yeah.
don't you?
Yeah. You got it.
I don't know.
Why did we call it Daredevil in the Details? Oh, because it's very specific and process driven. I was like, was that a pun? It kind of is, isn't it? Is there something there?
Well, yeah. There's a lot to analyze in this show, and therefore there's a lot of details.
Yeah.
And cool stories are all about the devil's in the details.
There you go. You did it.
See, it's my brain. It's just too big.
It's too many thoughts up in there. All right, we're getting out of here. We'll catch you guys next season. I should have just. Why? I keep pausing like I have something more to say, and I don't, Pat. I don't.
You're almost as bad at ending podcasts as Mitchie.
Wow, that's brutal because he's rubbish at it.
He is.
Got him on the way out. All right, we'll catch you all next season. Goodbye.
Quick drive back. See ya.